You're sitting at a dinner table listening. One person casually mentions they've maxed out their 401k for over a decade. Another talks about buying a rental property last summer. A third brings up a brokerage milestone you didn't even know was a thing. And then there's you, quietly running numbers in your head, trying to remember if you even have a 401k, and whether that $8,000 sitting in it actually counts as retirement. You smile, you nod, you say something polite. Yeah, that's great. But inside, something sinks and stays there. That night, you're lying awake, staring at the ceiling. The conversation won't stop replaying. You keep asking yourself the same questions. Did I miss something? Should I have bought a house years ago? Why didn't anyone explain investing when I actually needed it? And the one that hits hardest. Is it already too late? Here's the truth no one at that table is going to say out loud. Half of them aren't telling the full story. The guy bragging about his rental property didn't mention it's been sitting empty for months, quietly draining his bank account. Another person talking about perfect investing habits is carrying massive debt behind the scenes, and the rest? They feel exactly like you do. They're just better at pretending they don't. Because somewhere along the way, everyone learned the same rule. Look confident, even if you're not. That pressure you feel, that tight knot in your stomach, didn't come from nowhere. It came from a checklist that defined what success was supposed to look like. But there's one problem. That checklist was written decades ago. Back when a single income could support an entire family. Back when housing was affordable. Back when the rules of money were completely different. And yet, we're still measuring ourselves against it. Still feeling behind. Still feeling like we failed. Even when the system itself has changed. So let's do something most people avoid. Let's look at reality. Not outdated advice, not recycled financial myths, real numbers, real benchmarks, based on the world as it actually is today. Some of what you're about to hear might feel reassuring. Some of it might be uncomfortable. But more importantly, you're going to get something most people never receive. A clear path forward, even if you're starting late. Even if you feel behind. Even if you're starting from zero. Because here's the part almost nobody tells you. Starting late doesn't mean finishing last. In many cases, people who start later and take it seriously end up ahead of those who started early and drifted. There's a reason for that. A simple but powerful concept called contribution intensity. We'll break that down soon, and once you see how it works, something shifts. Your 40s stop looking like a deadline and start looking like your biggest opportunity. But first, let's confront the number that gets thrown around everywhere. By age 40, you're supposed to have 3 times your annual salary saved. So if you earn $80,000, that means $240,000 in retirement accounts sounds reasonable until you compare it to reality. Because when you look at actual data, the picture changes completely. According to recent data, the typical person between 35 and 44 has around $45,000 saved for retirement. Not $200,000, not $300,000, $45,000, which means half of people have even less than that. Think about that for a second. That's not 3 times their salary, that's barely a fraction of it. So if you've saved $30,000, $60,000, even $100,000, you're not behind. You're already ahead of a large portion of people your age. But here's the catch. Those ideal benchmarks you keep hearing, they weren't created to guide you, they were created to pressure you, to make you feel like you're falling behind. So you buy more products, seek more advice, and keep feeding the system. But being ahead of average isn't the goal either, because average doesn't lead to freedom. Average means working longer than you want. Or retiring later than you planned and hoping everything works out in the end. That's not the target. The real goal is simple. Control, security, and the ability to choose how you live your life. And that requires a different standard entirely. So instead of chasing outdated expectations, let's break down what being financially on track at 40 actually looks like in today's world. Let's start with the first real benchmark. Retirement savings. Not the unrealistic version you've heard before, but something grounded in reality. By 40, a strong target is having somewhere between 1.5 to 2 times your annual income invested. So if you earn $70,000, you're aiming for roughly $105,000 to $140,000. Not perfect, not extreme, but enough to put you on a solid path forward, because the real advantage isn't just what you've saved, it's what time does to it next. Take this scenario. At 40 years old, with $120,000 invested, even if you never added another dollar, that money alone could grow to nearly $780,000 by 65, assuming an average return. Not massive wealth, but a foundation. Now add consistent contributions during your 40s and 50s when your income is typically at its highest, and the outcome changes completely. Now you're not just surviving retirement, you're comfortable. That's the difference this benchmark creates. The second benchmark is simpler, but just as critical. Emergency savings. You need a buffer. 3 to 6 months of essential expenses, kept somewhere safe, liquid, and immediately accessible. This isn't about total spending. This is survival spending. Housing, utilities, food, insurance, transportation. For most people, that lands somewhere between $12,000 and $25,000, money you can access within 24 hours. Because this isn't optional money. And this is where most people get it wrong. Your emergency fund is not a backup for convenience. It's not for vacations. Well, not for upgrades, not for I don't feel like using a credit card. It has one job: to absorb impact, job loss, medical issues, unexpected repairs. Without it, every disruption pushes you backward. With it, the damage stops there. The third benchmark is non-negotiable. Debt. By 40, high-interest consumer debt should be gone completely. Credit cards charging 20% interest? Eliminated. Student loans? Either finished or clearly declining. Personal loans? Paid off. What remains should be controlled: a mortgage, maybe a reasonable car payment, ideally both at manageable interest rates. Because here's the truth most people avoid. If you're carrying credit card balances month after month, you're not just behind, you're actively being pulled backward. Every dollar of interest is working against you. The same way investments grow wealth. This drains it, and it does it quietly, relentlessly. Month after month. The fourth benchmark isn't about saving, it's about earning. By 40, your income should not look the same as it did at 30. It should be meaningfully higher. Not for status, not for ego, but because income is the engine behind everything else. Data consistently shows that peak earning years fall in your mid-40s to mid-50s. So by 40, you should already be moving in that direction. A practical baseline? At least 30% higher than what you earned a decade earlier, adjusted for inflation. If that hasn't happened, something in your trajectory needs attention. Because this isn't about ambition, it's about leverage. Two people can have identical discipline, saving the same percentage of income. But if one earns twice as much, they build wealth twice as fast. Over time, that gap becomes enormous. Not by chance, but by math. Now here's where everything shifts, because eventually you look at these benchmarks and realize you're behind. Maybe a little. Maybe a lot. And that realization hits hard. The instinct is immediate. Panic, regret, that feeling that you've already missed your window, that it's too late to fix it. Some people even shut down completely. They stop trying because catching up feels impossible. But this is where most people get it wrong, completely wrong, because the truth is, catching up in your 40s is often easier than starting in your 20s, and it comes down to one thing: capacity. At 25, your intentions might be strong, but your resources are limited. At 40, that changes. Your income is higher, your skills are sharper, your stability is stronger, which means your ability to act is dramatically different. A younger person might manage to invest a few $100s a month. At 40, that number can multiply. $1,500, $2,000, or more, and that's where the real power comes in, because when your contributions increase, the entire equation changes. This is what contribution intensity actually means. And once it clicks, you stop focusing on when you started and start focusing on how aggressively you move now. There's another advantage most people overlook. Your expenses don't keep rising forever. At some point, they level out. By 40, many of the big early life costs are already behind you. Student loans may be gone. Your wardrobe is built. You're no longer starting from scratch every time you move. You've already bought most of the things people spend their 20s chasing. And if you allow it, the constant cycle of upgrading slows down. There's also something more important: clarity. By this point, you finally understand how money actually works. In your 20s, investing often feels like guesswork. You pick funds based on names, you follow trends without understanding them, you panic when markets drop, and sell at the worst possible time. You make short-term decisions with long-term consequences. But by 40, you've seen enough. You've watched markets fall and recover You've felt volatility and survived it. And that changes how you think. You stop reacting. You start thinking long term. You realize something most people learn too late. Volatility isn't the enemy. It's the price of growth. Let's make this real. Meet someone we'll call Marcus, because his story shows exactly what happens when you take control at the right moment. At 40, Marcus was nowhere near where he thought he should be. He had $22,000 saved for retirement, a car payment, and about $8,000 in credit card debt. He earned $85,000 a year. But somehow it never felt like enough. Every month ended the same way, no progress, no momentum, just survival. By traditional standards, he was behind, but the real issue wasn't income, it was direction. His 30s had disappeared into something subtle, but dangerous. Lifestyle inflation. Every raise turned into slightly better living, a nicer apartment, more expensive habits. Better but not meaningful upgrades. Nothing extreme, nothing reckless, just unintentional. Money came in, money went out, and 10 years quietly disappeared. Then something changed. Over the next 7 years, Marcus completely rebuilt his financial life. No windfalls, no lucky breaks, no overnight success, just a system. A focused, step-by-step approach, executed in the right order. And this is where it becomes relevant to you, because everything he did is repeatable. Phase 1 was simple. Stop the leak. Marcus dedicated 1 week into a full financial audit, no guessing, no estimates, just raw data. He pulled 3 months of bank statements, 3 months of credit card transactions, and went through every single line. What he found surprised him. Multiple subscriptions he barely used, a gym membership collecting dust, services he forgot he was even paying for, all small, all recurring. Together, $340 per month, over $4,000 per year. Gone. Quietly, without him noticing. Then he looked deeper. His car loan, 8.9% interest. He refinanced it down to 4.2%. Same car, same life, but $127 saved every month. Within 30 days, Marcus had created almost $500 in monthly cash flow. Not by sacrificing, not by cutting his lifestyle, but by removing waste. Money he was already spending, now working for him instead. Phase 2 was aggressive, debt elimination. Every extra dollar went toward his credit card balance. No investing, no extra saving, just focus. Because credit card interest isn't just expensive, it's mathematically destructive. Around 20% working against you, guaranteed. No investment consistently beats that. So he removed it completely. He followed a simple strategy. Attack the highest interest first. Ignore everything else. Stay consistent. Stay focused. 8 months later, the debt was gone. And something powerful happened. That $500 he had freed up earlier, combined with the $350 he was paying toward minimums, became $850 per month, now available, now intentional, now building something. Phase 3 was protection. Before growing wealth, he needed stability, so he built a real emergency fund, from $2,000 to $15,000. 4 months of essential expenses, a buffer, a shield, something that meant the next unexpected problem wouldn't send him backward again. Because this is where most people fail. They try to build wealth without building stability first, and every setback resets their progress. Marcus broke that cycle, and from that point forward, everything started to compound. At first, building an emergency fund can feel like a delay, like you're pausing progress instead of making it. But the opposite is true. This is what makes everything else possible, because without it, every unexpected expense pulls you backward. You pay off debt, something happens. The debt comes back, again and again. A loop that never ends. The emergency fund breaks that loop, permanently. Then comes the next advantage most people don't realize exists. Getting older actually gives you leverage, because the system changes in your favor. Once you reach 50, you're allowed to contribute more into retirement accounts than younger investors. Higher limits, more capacity, more acceleration. But Marcus didn't wait for that. He started building momentum early. At 42, he positioned himself to take full advantage when the time came. The first move was simple and powerful. He captured his employer match immediately. His company matched 50 cents for every dollar he contributed, up to 6% of his salary. That's not just a benefit. That's an instant return, money he had been ignoring for years, losing, without realizing it. Then he did something most people avoid. He increased his contributions, slowly. 1% at a time, every 6 months. No shock, no drastic changes, just steady pressure. And because the increases were gradual, his lifestyle adjusted without resistance. By 45, he was contributing 18% of his income. And it felt normal. Then came the real shift, income, because Marcus understood something critical. Saving alone has limits, earning does not. So he invested in himself. Evenings, weekends, 6 months of focused effort, a specialized certification in his field. Cost? About $3,000. Return? Within 2 years, a promotion, an additional $22,000 per year. Now here's where everything could have gone wrong, because this is the moment most people lose momentum. They earn more and immediately spend more. But Marcus didn't. He held the line. Same lifestyle, same habits. The difference? Every extra dollar flowed into investments, roughly $1,400 per month, automatically, consistently. And this is where the results compound. By 49, just 7 years after starting from a weak position, Marcus had built over $380,000 in retirement savings. His car was fully paid off. His only remaining debt was his mortgage, and even that was shrinking faster than required. He wasn't guessing anymore. He was on track, a clear path toward over $1 million by his early 60s. And here's the truth. None of this required luck. No complex strategies, no perfect timing, just intensity, applied at the right moment. Look at the math. If you start at 40 and invest $2,000 per month with steady returns, you could reach nearly $500,000 by your mid-50s and approach $1 million by your early 60s. Now shift that timeline just 5 years later. Start at 45 instead, and the outcome drops significantly. Same effort, different window. That's how powerful timing is. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because starting late doesn't mean losing. Not if you move with intensity. I compare this. One person invests small amounts for decades. Slow, passive, comfortable. Another starts later, but contributes aggressively. Higher amounts, consistent focus. The second person often wins, not because they started earlier, but because they moved harder when it mattered. This is contribution intensity, and over a 25-year runway, it matters more than anything else. But there's one obstacle that stops people before they even begin. It's not lack of knowledge, it's not lack of opportunity, it's something quieter. Financial paralysis. You know what to do, you read about it, you watch content, you save ideas, but you don't act, because the gap feels too big, too overwhelming, too late. So you wait, and waiting makes it worse. More time passes, the gap grows wider, the pressure increases. And the cycle repeats. That cycle has to end, and it doesn't end with a plan, it ends with action. One move within the next 48 hours. Not everything, just one. If you're carrying high-interest debt, transfer it. Stop the interest from working against you. Create breathing room. Because momentum doesn't come from thinking, it comes from movement. That single action does something powerful. It stops the damage. Interest is no longer working against you, and for the first time, you have space to move forward. If debt isn't your problem, but savings is, then your move is different. You automate a fixed amount every paycheck, $200, $300, whatever you can sustain, and you remove the decision entirely. Because willpower is unreliable. Systems are not. When the money moves before you see it, you adapt without resistance. And if you've already saved but haven't started investing, then the action is even simpler. Log in. Increase your contribution even by 2%, not later, not after more research. Now, because progress doesn't come from perfect timing, it comes from starting. One move within 48 hours. That's all it takes to break inertia. Yeah, because once you move, momentum follows, and momentum is what carries everything else. But money isn't just about saving and investing. There's another layer most people ignore. Your career. Because your income, is the engine behind your entire financial life. And if that engine isn't growing, nothing else scales properly. You can optimize budgets all day. But if income stays flat, progress stays limited. By 40, you need leverage, not just effort. And leverage comes from specialization. Being good isn't enough. Being specific is what matters. Because generalists compete with everyone. Specialists compete with almost no one. If you can't clearly explain what you do better than most people in your field, you're blending in, and blending in costs you opportunities, negotiation power, income growth. Yeah, but when you narrow your focus, something changes. Competition drops, demand increases, and suddenly you're no longer chasing opportunities, they start finding you. There's another layer of protection most people overlook. Your network, not social media, not contacts you haven't spoken to in years, real connections, people who would respond if you reached out, people who could open a door when you need one, because careers don't always fail slowly. Sometimes they end overnight, and when that happens, your network becomes your safety net. But here's the mistake most people make. They only build relationships when they need them, which is already too late. The real advantage comes from consistency, checking in, staying connected, creating value before you ever ask for anything. It doesn't take much time. Well, but it changes everything when you need it. And then there's income diversification. Not for status, not for hype, for protection. Because relying on a single income source is fragile. One disruption, and everything stops. Even a small second stream changes that, a few $100s per month, a side skill, a small business, investment income, something that continues. Even if your main job doesn't, because the difference is massive. Without it, job loss equals panic. With it, you gain time, options, control. Now, if you're already in a stable position, there's a different risk, and it's just as dangerous. Complacency. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens gradually. You've done well, you've built momentum, you feel secure, so you relax, and slowly, your lifestyle expands. Now, better house, better cars, more spending, nothing extreme, just incremental upgrades. But over time, those upgrades compound, and suddenly, your income doubled. But so did your expenses. You're earning more than ever, but feeling the same pressure. Right back where you started, just at a higher level. The way out of that trap is awareness and recalibration, because every upgrade you make raises the cost of your future. That bigger house, it doesn't just cost more up front, it costs more to maintain, to insure, to operate, and all of that increases the amount you need to retire. Which means if you're not careful, you can move forward financially while actually falling behind. And that's the part most people never see. Sometimes your lifestyle rises faster than your savings, which means even while things look better on the surface, you're actually falling behind. Think back to that dinner table, the one that made you question everything, because what you saw there wasn't the full story. The person proudly talking about maxing out his retirement accounts? On paper, it looks impressive, hundreds of thousands saved, but behind that, a massive mortgage, additional borrowed money, major future expenses already locked in. That's not freedom, that's leverage. Another person brought up a rental property. Sounds like progress. But the reality? Ongoing losses, constant expenses, and years before it even becomes profitable. Not wealth, just delayed pressure. And the one celebrating an investment milestone, that wealth didn't come from discipline, it came from inheritance. And even that is already being spent. But none of that was visible, because at that table, everyone showed the highlight, not the reality. And you compared your full picture to their edited version, which made you feel like you were losing, even if you weren't. This is the trap, the performance of success, where everyone looks ahead and no one admits struggle. So let's reset the perspective, because the numbers themselves aren't the most important part. Direction is. Two people, same age, very different paths. One has built a large amount, but is barely moving forward. The other has less, but is building aggressively. Give it time. The second one wins. Every time. Beam because at this stage, speed matters more than position. Momentum matters more than history. If you're already ahead, don't slow down too early, because the final stretch is where outcomes separate. A few more years of discipline can translate into years, sometimes decades, of freedom later. And if you're behind, this is not the end, it's the opening. Because right now, you have something incredibly valuable, your peak earning years, control over your expenses, and enough time for compounding to still work. This is the moment where everything can shift, not gradually, but decisively. Because the person who takes action at 40, with focus, with intensity, often surpasses the one who started earlier, but never took it seriously. This isn't optimism, it's math, playing out over time. And eventually it comes down to a single moment. This one. Right now. 10 years from today, you'll look back here, and you'll remember one of two things. Either this was the point where everything changed, or it was just another moment you let pass. The numbers were never the real issue. The timing was never the real issue. The decision is.